Everyone, so I'm going to try to get through this one without crying. God spoke to my heart at church about some real raw stuff going on in my life. And I don't know about you, but sometimes do you ever feel like you've put in maybe price tags or limits on sin, or you think like this sin is worse than this sin, and so there should be a greater punishment? I've definitely done that. And there's times where I'm like, well, I can partially forgive someone, God, or I can forgive them for this thing, but heaven forbid they ever do that, and I would never forgive them if they did that to me. And there's been instances in my life where someone did sin against me in a way that I was like, I never thought that I could forgive them if they did that, God. Yet he is asking us, right, to be his hands and feet and to forgive like he forgives. So at church this morning when I was struggling, and honestly I had said something to someone that wasn't very kind, bringing up past mistakes, and I felt validated because they had done me wrong, right? But then at church, through the pastor's words, God just ministered to my heart. And it was like, no, if we are truly going to be his children and represent him, then he calls us to forgive even hard things, even things that seem beyond forgiving. And that God, in his grace, he forgives us for everything that we do. And he doesn't put a limit or a price tag per se on sin and say, well, one sin is worse than another. To him, sin is sin. And so if I've gossiped, if I've envied, if I've been, bitter in my heart, angry, all those things are sins. I've definitely sinned in my life in big and small ways. And yet, in my anger, I felt a righteous anger. I was thinking that I was better than this person. And God had to just pull me up short and say, no. And the pastor was talking about the woman caught in the act of adultery and how everyone was so eager to pick up that stone until Jesus said the words, you without sin, go ahead, cast the first stone. And not one of them could, in good conscience, throw and cast that stone at that woman, because they knew in their heart of hearts that all of us have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And so on top of all that, as God was ministering to my heart, you try not to cry, guys, he reminded me when he washed the disciples' feet before he was crucified. He washed all their feet. He didn't leave out Judas, that he knew was going to betray him and give him up and condemn him to death. He lovingly washed his feet. He did not forget about Peter, who was going to leave him in his darkest hour, who was going to also betray him in a different kind of way. He said, I'm going to go with you. He was going to go and fight to the death, is what he always said. Peter was so impetuous, and like so many of us, we have so many good intentions. And yet, when Jesus needed him most, he denied him 3 times. So it might not have been the same kind of betrayal that Judas did, but in a way, I'm sure to Peter, it cut him deep when he heard that rooster crow and he knew that he had denied Jesus 3 times, just like Jesus had told him he would. And yet Jesus, in his love and in his kindness, he knew what was going to happen. And yet, he still washed their feet. That's the kind of love that he has for each one of us. And he wants us to give it to all, not just the ones that are kind to us and the ones that love us and show us all his goodness and all of his love. He wants us to show people the hard ones, the ones that maybe we have viewed as enemies. Maybe they have done something that we just can't wrap our mind around, and yet he calls us to forgive. So friend, if you're like me and you have struggled with this area of forgiving someone for something that seems beyond imaginable to you, I just want to encourage you that God would just meet you right there and give you the strength. And it's not going to be a one and done deal, because I've thought that. I'm like, yep, I forgive him, I'm done, and I move on. And then something slaps against that pain that I thought was healed or healing, and it hurts. And then Like the other day when I said those not very nice things to that person out of anger and self-righteousness. And God had to remind me, like, I died for that person too, April. I died for your punishment and their punishment. So you're sitting here acting all holier than thou, and yet you sinned. You deserve punishment. You deserve death by the laws that were mandated, that were set before. We all deserve death. That was a punishment for sin that God had put with the children of Israel. So we all have fallen short of his glory. None of us can pretend that we haven't, in maybe a big way or maybe a small, but we've all fallen short. And he is calling us to have compassion and to show forgiveness. I know it's hard. It is not easy at all, and I wrestle with it sometimes daily. But yet again, I am choosing to say, okay, God, I know it's messy and I know it's hard, but help me. Help me to forgive them and walk it out with you, God. Help me to not hold. I think the hard part sometimes about forgiveness is we want that person to be punished to show that what they did to us was wrong and it was like worthy of punishment. But God took all that on himself. And so we have to, when we are forgiving them, we're basically going like he did, and he tacked all of our sin onto that cross. We're doing that. We are representing that God. We are tacking all the sin, all the wrong that they did to us. We are putting that on the cross, because if we truly believe that he died for our sins and covered our sins, then we truly believe that he did for the other people as well. And he told me one time, April, if anyone else told you that they had done the things that this person has done, you would say that God's grace is sufficient and his love is enough. So are you going to just speak it, or are you going to actually live my love in action? So friend, I am passing that on to you. God has given us a strength that it's going to take to forgive and walk it out. And then we're going to see one day all the beautiful, just like roses that bloom from those places that we thought would never bloom again. God is going to do such healing in our hearts. There is going to be, like I see, a vineyard and all the things flowering and then blossoming and growing. And then all the wine and the fruit that comes from those places that we thought were utterly devastated and we thought that we can never come back from. God does not want our fields to lay fallow and to not plant seeds of hope and love and forgiveness. He wants us to do the hard work so that we can reap the harvest, even when it's hard, my friend. So I pray that you will find the strength to do the hard things and forgive whoever has wronged you, big or small, and then you will know that you can walk it out with God in forgiveness and love and compassion, showing his love to all the world. I love you, friend. You got this, and God's got you.